All right, welcome everybody to our sixth edition of the CWMEA Q&A mentorship sessions. Today we have Jeff Chang from Decatur High School here to talk about incorporating jazz into the classroom. We're really lucky to have him here, and this session might have to take a hiatus in the next couple months, but thank you for being here if you're in the room, and thank you for logging onto the Zoom if you're able to later. And this video will be posted onto our CWMEA YouTube channel, so be sure to check it out once it is posted. So again, welcome to Jeff Chang. Jeff, if you want to introduce yourself, maybe say a little bit about your bio and your current job, that'd be great.
Yeah. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. So my name is Jeff Chang. I'm the band director at Decatur High School. Before Decatur High School, I was teaching in Yakima. I was teaching on the Yakima reservation for 6 years before I moved to Federal Way to teach. I'm from Taiwan. I was born and raised in Taiwan. I didn't move to the States until I was a junior in high school when I was about 16 or 17. And then I moved to California. I went to, James Logan High School, went to Cal State Hayward to get my performance degree. And then I moved to Boston to, continue studying music, but more focused in jazz. I went to Berkeley for Berkeley College of Music a little bit. And then I got my master's from New England Conservatory. And I got my teaching degree from Peabody Conservatory. And after that, I moved to Washington.
Well, that is a very stacked resume, and we're very lucky to have you here in Washington. I know that we were just having a conversation in this room about how admired you are in our community. So thank you so much for being here to talk to our collegiate members today. Yeah, so we're gonna be talking about incorporating jazz into the classroom, which is a highly requested topic. For those of you who are CWMEA members on this Zoom right now, we put out a survey and asked, what do you want to learn? What do you feel like you're the least confident about teaching? What do you feel like you're lacking in your curriculum? And the biggest request was jazz. I know as an oboe player, that is something that I am feeling very much outside of, and I want to be able to learn how to teach it for my future students. So all of these questions today are pulled from that survey, and we'll just jump right in. So the first question here is, how can jazz compositions and techniques be woven into my future concert ensembles?
Right. I'm actually going to turn this question around, for those people who are here right now. I want to hear, what do you think, what is jazz? And things like, what is jazz and what does it mean to be teaching jazz? Why are we teaching jazz in public schools? Like, what is the purpose of jazz education in public schools? Why is it important? So, that's the question I want to kind of ask you guys. I want to, just very casually, I want to know what you think.
I can answer that.
Okay.
I've always seen jazz, and this is why I want to teach jazz in public schools as well. I've always seen jazz as an outlet of student expression. You can say the same for high school orchestras and wind bands, but they don't get the same personal expression that you can get through jazz, and that's why I think it's important. Students are able to express themselves and their perspectives and their experiences, as opposed to the perspectives and experiences of the composer.
I like that. That's great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's really important to teach because it's like a music that's native to the Americas, and it was not founded by white people, and I'm a flute player and I have a classical background, but when I studied jazz, I realized how difficult it was for me to be creative, and that jazz, for me, is the only place where I can exercise true creativity, and I think that is like, I'm really biased, but I think the most valuable art form. It's like,
well, thank you.
The greatest demonstration of creativity and technical facility is to be able to improvise.
Yeah, for sure. And also it's it's everything. It's a different culture. It's democracy. It's, like you say, it's Black American music. It's amazing. Great. I love that. Okay, anyone else, want to share your thoughts on like what is jazz?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna reiterate what Gavin was saying, that it's representative of many different student populations, whether, like you were saying, it's African American music, or if you're someone like Ume was saying about needing more creativity beyond the classical setting. I think it represents so many experiences in a way that classical music either can't or hasn't been, I guess we haven't thought of it in that way, whereas jazz, it's much more natural to have those experiences.
Yeah, great. So the reason why I turned this question around is that I think it's very important. By the way, I love all your answers. I think these are great answers. And I think it's very important for us to know before we ask all of these questions about like, how do we, integrate like jazz into our classroom teaching and stuff like that. I think it's important for us to know that why do we want to do it, or what is jazz to you? What is jazz to me? So that way that you are convinced. So if you know the goal that you're trying to achieve, it will be so much easier for you to kind of fit everything else you're doing into that big umbrella, just to make things happen, right? So some of the things I love, you said, personal expression, great, especially in jazz. I mean, I think there's a lot of personal expression in concert band music and wind ensemble music, but maybe not to the degree of jazz, right? I love the culture background of it. A lot of, allow me to get on my soapbox for a little bit. I just hate it when, teachers don't talk about, and I'm guilty myself, don't talk about the historic background of this music, the cultural relevance of jazz music. A lot of times we'll get so busy, like, teaching the notes and articulations and this and that. We don't, today is it March today? No, not yet. It's the last day. But anyway, so it's Black History Month. How many people or how many teachers actually talked about like in their jazz bands, using jazz as a vehicle to talk about Black history, in our country, right? So these are all like great reasons, and I think everyone, not that everyone has to have the same reason to be teaching jazz or like have the same goal, but I think it's very important for you to know what is your goal. As far as what would you like to do with this jazz music? Okay. Now, so with that, obviously, this is I would like to also provide something that's applicable. It's not all philosophical, right? So what are some of the things that we could do, as far as integrating like jazz music into your regular classroom teaching, or like teaching concert band or wind ensemble or different things, right? So I think we need to look at what is unique in jazz that what Lizzie was saying, like what classical music does not have. What is unique, and what can we do with it? Okay. Once again, I think everybody would have different answers, but for me, I think one of the biggest element is improvisation. In jazz, there's so much. I think improvisation is like really essential to jazz music. So I think improvisation is a big part of it. So what are some of the things that I do, to actually incorporate improvisation into concert band playing, right? I actually got this from Robert W. Smith. I don't really like, have my concert band kids, get up and take a solo or something. I don't, during first suite, I don't really do that, right? But some of the things that, we could actually, it's more compositional. I went to see a session at WMEA, and Robert W. Smith was talking about, to talk about like chords, right? So he would, something that, he would add the element of improvising, or this whole randomness. He would have kids pick different scale degrees. It's like, you pick a scale degree, you pick a scale degree, and let's play this, play these scale degrees together. And it forms a chord. And it's, it's a great, even though it's a small thing right there, but I think it's a great way of, for kids to know that, oh, this is how you form a chord. And, and there's no right or wrong. With certain scale degrees, when you form a chord, it has this kind of feeling to it. It has kind of this kind of, it's purple, right? Or it's green or whatever, right? So I think, so that's one thing I do quite a bit, especially when we're tuning, or we're warming up, or when we're not working on a scale, for instance. Okay, instead of, all right, play the scale up and down, let's play B flat major scale up and down. Sometimes I would say that, all right, let's go and pick scale degrees. So instead of like, just have like muscle memory, knowing your finger patterns and play scales up and down. They're really thinking about, oh, what is the fifth scale degree in the key of B flat? Those are all things, I think, you could, easily integrate into, teaching a band class or something that is not exactly jazz. Okay, let's see. And also something I think that's unique in jazz, I think it's the specific groove that you have, with jazz, because most of the, uh, it don't mean a thing if you ain't got that swing, right? So, to be able to, understand like the swing feel, I think it's very important. So that actually, realistically, I think it's kind of difficult to, how do you incorporate that into your concert band teaching? Because I personally don't think it's a great idea to like play the first suite in the swing feel. I don't think that's the right way to do it. But I don't know. But I think I think it's important. I think it's important for us to think about what is unique about jazz, and what can we do to incorporate those unique elements into the things, whatever it is that you're doing in your classrooms. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen you do this thing where you have your students choose the scale degrees and then make a melody
Oh.
for warm-ups. And so it says a lot about your teaching that you're actually practicing the things that are in your philosophy. So that's awesome. Yeah, and so I think this is a good segue into our next question, especially because if we're talking about the crossover between what can happen in your concert ensembles and what can happen in your jazz ensembles, one of the biggest commonalities is just arrangements and knowing how your part fits into the group. And so this question is more about the arrangement side of things, especially around flex arrangements. So how do you feel about flex arrangements and or non-traditional instruments in jazz ensembles? What do you think the benefits and deficits are for the classroom?
Yeah, I think it's great. There's nothing wrong. I am a firm believer that there is no jazz instrument and there's no non-jazz instrument. Like, jazz is not about what you play, a jazz, or not what instrument you play. Jazz is about, like you said, it's about, personal expression. It's a culture. So jazz is not about what instruments. I think, whatever that allows your students to be able to be exposed to this music, to have a chance to play this music, to have a chance to, appreciate this music. I think that's the most important thing. It doesn't have to, you don't have to, just because you played oboe, you don't have to learn the saxophone in order to be in jazz band. So I'm a firm believer in that. However, once again, realistically, it's hard to do because I think it's important to really look at the reality and the things and the actual goal, right? So in a perfect world, we should all the instruments should be in jazz band, but unfortunately, with the structure that we have right now, if you have a band like full of like oboes and bassoons and all that, you go to a jazz festival, you're probably not gonna get a trophy home, right? Unfortunately, and I think it's wrong. I really think it's wrong because once again, like we talked about it, what is jazz? Jazz is not what instrument you play. Jazz really is about so many other things. So, but and then there's some of the things that we'll talk about later is that how do you keep your program strong? You kind of have to play the game a little bit, unfortunately. So this is what I did in the very beginning. I'll share my personal experience when I took over Decatur. About 9 years ago, when I took over, we had one jazz band, and so it was a very traditional saxophones, trombones, and trumpets, and rhythm section. So that was the jazz band that we had before, and using that as a stepping stone almost. I in about 2 or 3 years, I tried to clean things up so they were sounding really good. And we went out to do competitions, went to festivals and stuff like that. And once you start to get a little bit of reputation, and then you have kids wanting to do it. Once you have more kids, when I was able to start, not too long ago, I was able to start my jazz too at Decatur. So I have 2 jazz bands now with the second jazz band, and that is the perfect place. For students who say that, hey, I really love this music, but I don't want to learn because I played over. I don't want to learn a different instrument. I just want to play jazz music. And that is the perfect group, for kids to do that. Okay. Some of the kids said that, hey, I really want to get into this really competitive side of this music. I enjoy go out there and competing and all that. But in the meantime, there are kids that, hey, I just want to try this music. I'm curious about improvisation. I want to learn how to improvise and all that, and all those things, right? So that's pretty much what I did. So I personally think that it's great for you to use those flex arrangements as far, and then that because you're able to include so many more kids, right? Think about how many kids are kind of like turned away because you play an instrument that is not a jazz instrument, and think about how many. I'll give you an example. My teacher at New England Conservatory, Steve Lacey, he played the soprano saxophone. He didn't play tenor or alto. He only played the soprano. But back in the '60s, he was trying to go to Berkeley to major in soprano saxophone, but he wasn't allowed to. He wasn't allowed to major in soprano saxophone because people didn't think that was a real instrument. Okay, and he was actually playing with Monk. This is like one of the greatest like jazz saxophonists there is, but like because the instrument he played, he was turned away from supposedly a jazz school, right? So think about that, and I think it's so important for us educators to really in a way restructure what we think about what jazz is. I'm just my feeder program, Lakota Middle School. By Mr. Sean Roller. He's doing a great job, and he's doing exactly what I was just preaching about. Like he includes whatever you play. If you want to play jazz, like join jazz band. So his jazz band was pretty big. So we went to one of the festivals, and one of the clinicians was like, "Oh yeah, you should make it smaller because what you have is a concert band on stage." It's like, so what? So what? How come you have like bassoons? Like, so what? Jazz is not an instrument. Jazz is not an instrumentation. Jazz is a culture.
Yeah, I love that ending. Jazz is a culture. And I think you can tell that in the band programs that I've seen. The students who are in jazz band, no matter what instrument they play, and especially those groups that do have non-traditional jazz instruments in their groups, those are often the kids who get the most out of their band classes, have the best connections with their peers, and often are doing the best in school too. And I think this, again, segues really nicely into our third question here, where jazz is a very important class because students make those connections socially and academically, but a lot of jazz programs are seen as extracurriculars that get cut. And so this question, again, came from our survey, and it says, have you run into any issues with administration viewing jazz ensembles as extra or expendable classes? How can we advocate for inclusion of jazz being as important as concert band classes?
Right. No, that is a great question. So once again, you will have to think about the reality, right? So I personally have never ran into that problem, probably because I love jazz so much. It's almost like one of my focus, when I teach. But think about that through my experience. I really think, and I don't think this is a jazz specific question. I mean, maybe a little bit more with jazz because 0 hour and, sometimes it's run as a club, right? But I think, if you put yourself in your principal's shoe, like why would they want to support you? What are some of the things that you're doing that make them want to support the program, right? You kind of have to think about like what do they want? And once again, unfortunately, we have to play the game a little bit. We have to know what they want. So if we're producing the things that they want, they will most likely they will try to give you something back to keep that going, right? So so before I get into some of the the specific things that jazz classes are running into, some of the strategies that I have used is that a lot of times band directors are doing amazing jobs with their programs, but unfortunately people don't know about it, right? I'm guilty myself. Like a lot of times, like my school teachers, they don't know anything about like, oh, your kids are, doing great, solo and ensemble. They made it into state. They don't know anything about it. They don't know what it means. They don't know that, we're performing at Windfest, which is like a big deal. It's a great, a great festival. They don't know anything about that. All right. So how do we advocate that? Well, how do we make people know that we're doing something amazing? right? So I think it's very important. I know it's hard um, toot your own horn, so to speak. It's sometimes we never feel comfortable kind of bragging about these things. But unfortunately, as a teacher, you kind of have to do that. I always, if I always send out an email, to my staff members about like, oh, we did this weekend. It was great. Attach a couple photos, so they get to see what's going on. And the more you do it, the more they think that, oh wow, there's really a lot of good things happening, and most likely there are a lot of great things happening, right? People just know about it. Now, whenever I do any gig outside of school, I always talk to the person who invited me to there to play. For instance, I don't know, maybe this senior home invited my jazz band to go over there to play for 30 minutes, for their residents. At the end of it, I always ask the organizer, say, hey, do you mind writing a letter to my principal, to my superintendent? Just be honest. Tell them what you think. Tell them how we did. If you like, especially if you like what we did, can you actually, write a few words and tell them that, we did a great job. And that is huge. That is huge because, when principals or superintendents, your bosses, when they see these emails, it's like, because, you have to know they get a lot of angry emails. They get a lot of unpleasant emails from parents and colleagues and so when they're getting something to tell them that, hey, your band sounded great. They showed up to my event. They sounded great. They're awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. When they keep getting these emails, they start to go, wow, they're really doing a lot of PR for me. This program really is the face of my school. Not just the football team, not just the basketball team, but band is doing a lot for me. So I think I need to invest a little bit more, or at least I need to continue to support. Once again, I think it's very important to learn how to advocate for yourself, for not for yourself, but for your program. So people know the great things that you're doing. But okay, so let's talk about what are some of the realistic problems that we run into with jazz band not being seen as a real class. I think scheduling is a real challenge. It's not. I don't think it's anyone trying to like cut jazz band or anything like that. But there's a reason why jazz band is 0 hour, right? Because I'm pretty sure you guys know, like if you with all the AP classes you're taking or whatever, there's no room for you to take jazz band. So the only time that you're able to take jazz band is to do it in the morning, right? So and that's why there's that. So scheduling problem, but putting jazz as a 0 hour class creates a different set of problems. What about for the kids who because usually there's no 0 hour buses, right? School buses. So what about for the kids who don't have a ride? What about for the kids, their parents wouldn't drive them, and things like that. So that creates a different set of equity problems with kids aren't able to get to zero hour jazz band. And my jazz bands, they're 0 hour, and I don't have an answer. I don't have a solution right now, but I certainly feel guilty because I know many kids. They say, Mr. Chang, I'm gonna join jazz band as soon as I get a car, right? And that breaks my heart. It's like, why do you need a car to join jazz band, right? So but those are, I think, I think it's important for us to, once again, put yourself in your principal's shoe to understand, like, what are some of the challenges that they're running through, so you could, instead of like just telling them what you want or just complain to them, you could also be part of the team and think about, come up with a solution, right? And say, hey, can we try this? Can we try that? What do you think? And I think that's also, kind of building this really good, healthy relationship, professional relationship with your admin.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that was one of the questions that was in the survey was administration communications seem really daunting, especially for young teachers. But like you're saying, when it's something you're so passionate about and obviously has a positive impact on the students, it's definitely worth that playing, like you're saying, playing the game, fighting the good fight for these classes that are really, really powerful for students. So thank you for
Right.
your words on that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving down to our next question. Again, this one's from the survey. It says, I'm a music major who loves listening to jazz, but I play an instrument that is not traditionally included in jazz bands, so I have very little experience playing jazz. What are the foundational things I need to know before I step in front of a jazz band in my school?
Okay. No, that's a great question. So there's a lot of like real life applications in that, like, some really, concrete things that you need to know, right? So first thing, I would like to encourage, if you don't play a traditional jazz instrument, I encourage you to play jazz with your instrument anyway. Okay, you don't have to join a group, because I know sometimes there's a lot of different reasons you don't. Maybe you feel conscious about it, or like nobody wants to play with you. Unfortunately, that happens, right? But there's so many like YouTube like backing tracks. Okay, you could type in, it's like, hey, I want to play a blues, right? Just type in F blues on YouTube, and just you don't have to tell people about it. You could do it secretly. Do it in the closet. It's like, yeah, I'm playing F blues on my oboe, right? It's okay, right? Just to know that what it feels like to be playing jazz. Okay, so just that process that you're just searching and you're looking for, you don't even know what you're looking for, but it's just that just experiencing, that I think it's great. It's going to add a lot to. It's going to add a lot of like depth to your jazz teaching, because you like yourself doing it. Are there some other really important things is that I think you need to have at least, three sets of, depending on what school you're teaching, right? So if you know already, like, you have a middle school gig, you will be teaching middle school, at least have the first concert ready, like, pick up the tunes. Knowing that, okay, let's say that this is your first day at the school, you don't really know the level of the students. So maybe have like a couple sets of music, maybe like, like a set of like an easy set and something that's more advanced, right? So, have that ready. So, like, the first set you go in, you're like, I have no idea. At least you have some tunes picked out for them, right? So that actually goes into some researching. You need to know your composers. You need to know your repertoire. You need to know, like, what are some of the composers who write like really good middle school jazz band stuff. Okay. I actually, since I haven't taught middle school in such a long time, so I did a little research with my one of the middle school directors, in the district. Is Miss Chris Leslie, who's also at Sequoia Middle School, is a great teacher. So he gave me some like really cool suggestions. He says that especially for middle school, Mark Taylor is a great composer. A lot of things that's written by Mark Taylor. He said that in his experience, kids really enjoy playing, arrangements by Mark Taylor. Also, many of you may know him, Greg Yasnitsky. He's the professor at Wazoo, and he actually writes a lot of like really good, accessible music for younger students. And also, and you'd be surprised, Benny Carter actually has a lot of, really easy arrangements. Like he actually wrote them. It's not like somebody else arranged. So the saxophonist, the jazz legend Benny Carter, he actually has a lot of, his library has a lot of really easy tunes, and they're actually very appropriate for middle school students to learn. And also, some of the publications you could go in and listen would be like obviously J.W. Pepper. I personally really like E-Jazz Lines. It's basically you could go on and you could listen to like different tracks, and they have a lot of different arrangements. That's a good one. Sierra Music has a lot of good, has a good jazz library. You could check out the things that they have right there. But I think it's very important. One thing is to have some tunes picked out, so you're not completely overwhelmed and clueless. When you step on the podium and go, I don't know what to do. Okay, so pick out the tunes. So that's number. I think that's the number one thing. Another thing I think this is a very common problem, maybe. Okay, I've definitely myself, I have experienced this. Being a horn player, being a wind player, I don't know anything about my rhythm section. So even even with let's say you, Lizzie, even if you play oboe, you kind of know like how a saxophone works. You kind of know how a trumpet works. So like because it's a wind instrument, so it's much easier for you to relate to that. But as far as like teaching a bass player, teaching a drummer, and teaching a piano player, that could be really daunting. It's like I don't know, right? So I was definitely, I still feel that way right now. So I think some of the really basic things is to for bass, I think it's very important for you to know how to construct a walking bass line. You don't have to be able to play on the bass. I can't play the bass at all, but I know how to kind of construct a walking bass line. Okay, so let's say that, hey, Miss Harvey, I don't know how to do it. Can you write it out for me? At least you're able to take the time and write out the walking bass line for the student. So knowing how to construct a walking bass line. So I think that's like almost like a minimum knowledge that you need to have on bass. For piano, I think it's very important for you to know how to, first of all, how to read chord changes, understanding like the chord symbols and all that, and also how do you play a really simple jazz voicing. Okay, and it's actually a lot easier than you think. I don't want to get too deep into like music theory right now, but for jazz piano voicing, the most on your left hand for the most part, it's going to you will be playing a root and the seventh, and on your right hand you could just play 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, right? So you have the basic chord tones, and you're adding a little bit of color. You're adding like the 9 into it with your pinky right there, right? So and that's great, and that's really where you start. Okay, even though once they actually start playing, you don't play the root anymore because it's going to conflict with the bass. But that's kind of it. And the next thing you do is that how do you to be able to play some 2-5-1s using this really simple jazz voicing, to be able to play some 2-5-1s. So at least when you are teaching and when your kid comes to you and asks you, I don't know how to play this, I don't read chord changes, you're able to write out a few notes, go, all right, that's a C chord, so you will play B in the left hand, you'll play E and G and whatever on your right hand. So you're able to like write out something really simple for your students. So I think that's actually very important, especially for someone, not even for somebody who has a lot of jazz experience, is to know how to teach your rhythm section. Once again, for the bass, know how to construct a walking bass line. For your piano, know how to do jazz voicing. Oh, drums. Okay, I forgot to mention drums. Drums. How do you do a very simple swing feel, right? And it's actually a lot easier than I thought when I didn't know, because the drummers, they always make it sound so fancy. It's like, wow, there's so many things going on. But the truth is, the basic really is just a right cymbal, hi-hat, and maybe a little snare, right? And that's it. Okay, so to be able to keep hi-hat on 2 and 4, and do right cymbal, just do quarter notes. You don't even have to go the ding ding ding. You could just go ding 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 quarter notes. That's great. Okay, bass drum is you could take the bass drum away. You don't need bass drum in jazz. A little bit of B2 and B4 on the snare drum, and that's it. And to be able to play that yourself, so you're able to demonstrate that. But and that's once again, because what you're going to find out is that a lot of the drummers, especially in middle school, when they come in, they don't know anything about how to play a swing groove. They could probably play a rock groove, but so that's something that you need to be able to do to demonstrate, so they know at least how to get things started.
Great. Yeah, I love that you're talking about just, we don't have to get fancy right away. We can just start with the basics, and that will help our students so much. I think all of this topic is a great transition into our questions that we ask in every session. These are kind of the fun ones that our members like to hear about. And I'll just kind of broaden the question we just talked about, which is, what is one thing that you wish you knew before becoming a teacher? So we just talked about things that you should know before becoming a jazz instructor, but when you were just starting out in your education career, what shocked you the most? What did you not know before you didn't know?
Right. With me, probably, I had no idea teaching is so much fun. I don't know, maybe it could be my personality, it could be my culture. I grew up in Taiwan. Your parents is always on you about, I'm your typical Asian. Like, it's like you gotta find a real job. Okay, you can't just, jazz musician. That's not a real job. You gotta make money. Why don't you become a teacher? And this and that. So it's like, all right, fine, I'll become a teacher. But once I got into it, once I started teaching, it's like, wow, this is awesome. Like, really? Like, I get paid for doing this stuff? This is great. But probably because I had really low expectation when I entered the job. I feel embarrassed talking about that, right? It's like, a lot of, most of you, like, you get into teaching because you really want to make a difference. But I got into teaching is because I kind of had to. I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky because I realized that it is so much fun, and it is such a special job to be a teacher. But with that said, okay, so that's kind of on the positive side of things. But with that said, some of the common things that I have seen, like young teachers, that they are struggling with is that, and I'm sure you guys have heard this from many teachers, that you have to be organized because unfortunately, I would say like 30% of your job is music making, 70% of your job is like paperwork or something like that, right? So, but there's going to be a huge chunk of your time that you need to be spending on um, uh, doing paperwork. Okay, so you have to find a system. You have to be organized. Okay, I can tell you how many times teachers, it's like, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to sending my bus request, so I can't. We can't go to the festival anymore, right? When I was a kid, when I heard that, I was like, wow, that is terrible. Like, how can you? That's such a how can you make that mistake? But now I'm a teacher. It's like, it's pretty easy to make that mistake because there's a pile of things that you need to take care of. There's so many papers you need to sign, and there's so many things you need to do. So make sure that you are organized. So that's one thing. People skill. Unfortunately, you can't live in your own bubble, right? You have to go out there and deal with a lot of people. Let it be, your students. Okay. Some of the teachers I know, they're so knowledgeable. They're great musicians, but they don't have that connection with their students. And as a result, it makes it the program is not as strong or healthy as it should be, right? So have people skill. How do you communicate with your coworkers? How do you communicate with your principals? How do you communicate with your parents? Those are all really important skills to have, because these are people that is going to it's going to influence your job a whole lot, right? So having people skill. Let's see. Another thing, and I think it really bothered me when I was, or that's it really scared me, intimidated me when I first got into teachings, because oh, I'm a teacher now. I need to know everything. I need to have answers for everything. But the more I do it, the more I realize that it is not. It is totally okay not to know everything. It is totally okay for you to go out and ask for help. It is, and once I realized that, I'm so much happier, because before I kind of have this chip on my shoulders, like I have to be perfect all the time. When I go out there, when I see somebody's group is better than my group, I go, oh my god, like, what do I like? They're better. But now it's like, wow, they're awesome. This is cool. Like, I'm going to approach the teacher and say that, how did you do it, right? And those are it just makes me so much happier as a teacher. It's not a competition, or you don't have to be perfect all the time. Just enjoy what you do. It's a journey for the students. It's also a journey for you as well as a teacher. And we're always growing. If you're not growing in the job, and it's not, this is, you should get a new job. And teacher is one of those jobs that there's so many opportunities for you to grow and learn and be better and be happy.
I love that you took this answer in a positive direction, because we've had conversations with the other speakers about this, and it can get very overwhelming and daunting to think about all the things that we don't know yet, because we haven't either been in front of our own ensembles or whatever. And I think that there are so many great ways to kind of twist these scary things into really positive learning opportunities, just like you're talking about. So thank you for
Mhm.
Such a great answer. And I'm conscious of our time, so I'm going to skip down to our last question, which is one of my favorites. It is, do you have any funny classroom management horror stories? And to make this educational for our college students, what are your go-to tools to combat misbehavior in the classroom?
Hmm. Yeah, when I saw this question earlier, I can't think of anything. I can't think of like a funny situation. But there, I think, but behavior has never been a big problem in my room, and I think the reason is because I spend a lot of time setting expectations in the beginning of the class, like in the beginning of the semester. Especially when I used to teach beginning band, in fifth grade. Like the first week, we don't even play, and I create like creative fun things for them to do, but like we just learn how you walk inside my classroom, how do you sit down, how do you set the chairs, or how do you set the music stands. We spend a lot of time doing that, and especially like younger students or like high school kids as well, they need constant reminder. There are two things that they keep forgetting, or they're kind of testing your boundary as well. So you have to be very consistent in reinforcing your expectations. Okay, so and you don't have to do it in a mean way, right? So for instance, this kid, instead of walking in and set up their instrument and start warming up on their own, this kid sits down and start looking at his cell phone, right? And instead of like get all mad about it, it's like, oh yeah, how can you do that? Maybe like just walk over, gently tap on his shoulder, say, hey, are we doing okay today? Do you want to set up your instrument, and then like and put your phone away? Then a lot of times the kids go, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, of course I'll do that, right? But when you approach them in a non-threatening way, they respond to you so much better. Okay, so that's so one thing is like setting expectations, and another thing is that be really patient. Don't take it personally. A lot of times kids doing these the kids who are misbehaving, they for the for the most part they want your attention. They don't know that's what they want, but they're acting out because they need someone to notice the problem that they're having in life. And this is, trust me, this is easier said than done, because a lot of times when kids are doing stuff, you just go, you get so angry, right? But and I think that's the hard thing about being a teacher, is that you have to remember that, hey, I'm an adult, I'm the adult in the room. I have to keep my cool and like really analyze the situation, and don't do anything that you regret. Okay. So I guess it's not really a funny story, but when I first started teaching, sometimes when I feel like so mad about certain behaviors in the room, and now in retrospect thinking about it, they weren't really bad behaviors, they just like a little chatty, right? But as a young teacher at the time, I was like, oh my god, I told you not to talk and you're still talking. And after like constant reminders, they're still talking. And I remember one time I just got so mad, but I just walked away. I just walked into my office. I just closed the door. And I just didn't want to say anything I would regret. I would regret. But that did it. Kids was like, oh, what did we do? He just like walked away. So kids were great, for the rest of the semester. And that was not intentional. I just needed. I was like, I'm done. Like I just need a place to hide for a little bit, right? Yeah, I think I think the most important thing is probably setting expectation in the very beginning, and be really consistent in reinforcing them, and be reasonable as well. Be reasonable, definitely. When you're setting your rules and your expectations, be able to explain why on every single thing, right? And that when you ask yourself, why do I have this rule? And if you can't answer yourself, that means that you may need to modify it. You may need to, or talk to someone. It's like, okay, versus uniform. Why, kids may ask you, why do we need to wear all black as our uniform? Or like, why do we need to wear uniform when we go to a concert? Right? So have a reason. I tell them, well, because, we're a team, we need to look unison. We're going to sound good, but, unfortunately people, watch concerts, right? So we need to, so always have a reason for the rules that you're setting. So when the kid asks you, you're able to tell the kid, so this is the reason why we're doing this. Yeah, so I think that's my take on classroom management or dealing with behavior issues.
Yeah, those are all really, really great answers. And I think I've heard a lot from our other speakers that setting expectations early on is the perfect way to do that. And I think I have a mini follow-up question. How is setting expectations for middle school different for high school? Because I know we have a lot of members who are not sure which one they want to teach, and they're concerned about the behavior on both ends of the spectrum. So I wanted to hear your opinion on that.
Uh-huh. Right. So, the obvious age difference, right? So middle school, they're just, hormone raging kids. They're just like they need a lot of patience, a lot of structure, a lot of constant reminders for them to do the right things. So you have to be, as a middle school teacher, you would have to be extra patient with the students, and be ready after you explain to them something like 5 times, they still don't get it. Right? You just have to keep doing it, keep doing it. With high school, it's a little bit better. But this year, it's funny because we're coming back from the pandemic. The freshmen that's coming in, the last time they were at school, they were like 7th graders, right? So they really don't remember how to school. Like, so it almost was like, teaching middle school kids. However, so I was extra slow in the beginning of the year, but I love that because because I took that into consideration. I know that they missed so much regular school in the past 2 years. So I was extra patient and I was very understanding as far as, okay, there's a reason why this kid is behaving this way because he hasn't been at school for so long. And because of that, I feel like it's the relationship between me and the students is so much better this year because it wasn't like, okay, I told you twice already, you should be doing it. All right. And it's like, okay, fine, that's all right. Okay, you forgot, let's do it again. Let's do it again. So when kids see that, they see that how much you really respect them and care about them. Right. And most, I would say most of the band kids, they're pretty cool kids. They're not really there because they won't have to take the class, right? So they're not really there to like mess with you or like to make your day miserable. A lot of times, for the most part, they really, if they're misbehaving, they're just really having a bad day or they just simply forgot, right? But to go back to your question, I think, for middle school, you just have to be extra patient. With high school, things could move slightly faster, but it's still somewhat the same thing. Just be patient.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for being here. These are amazing conversations that we've had, and I know that a lot of our collegiate members will really benefit from this conversation. So to those of you who are here in the room or are going to watch this YouTube video later, you can catch this again. It will be posted on our YouTube channel. It's WMEA Collegiate on YouTube, and you can watch this anytime. You can share it on your chapters, Instagram pages, or Facebook pages, and just make sure that everybody has the word out that awesome sessions like this exist on the internet for you to learn. So again, thank you so much, Jeff, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Jeff Chang, I'm your biggest fan.